Good morning. This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for thoughts, theories, queries. Um, Steve, every time you write something, um, the first time I read it, I think I get exactly your message. But then when I read it again, it's like, wait a second, this is what it means to me now.
Right,
Um,
right.
so I love that you write them and that we talk about them on this show because, um, so many of us, we're sort of stuck in our ways. And when we think of something, it can only be black and white. And the reality of it is, life is not black and white. So, what are we going to talk about today? Which theories?
Well, actually, we're going to talk about a couple of favorites of mine. For number 41 and number 42. They're both. Uh, how should I put this? Well, they definitely both piss me off, but um, uh, you'll see when I read.
Okay.
I guess they'll speak for himself.
All right.
The first one is number 42, and it's called The Influencer. This one I wrote fairly recently. My sister called last week. She told me about an article she had read in the Wall Street Journal about a 27-year-old man who made millions via social media. His occupation, influencer. Apparently, anybody, however devoid of any actual skill, can make some pretty good dough by simply chatting on TikTok or Twitter or Instagram about anything and everything. As long as people like what you have to say, and more importantly, can relate to what you have to say, you too can be an influencer. It turns out that as of a couple of years ago, 3.5 billion people actively use social media. That's roughly 45% of the world's population. And a lot of people look to influencers to somehow help them with their daily lives. Some of them talk about fashion, others talk about politics, and some, mostly celebrities, merely post pictures of themselves doing ordinary things. And oddly enough, that last group has the most followers. You can be a nano influencer on one end of the spectrum with fewer than 1,000 followers, or a mega influencer on the other end, having more than 1 million followers. I suppose there's nothing wrong with making a buck or two however you can. If you can get rich convincing people that you know what you're talking about, all the power to you. I'm just a little uncomfortable with the terminology, influencers and followers. I will influence you and you will follow me. It sounds insidious to me, like there's a hidden agenda that'll one day surface. I can think of a few examples in history where a charismatic leader influenced unsuspecting followers to a disastrous end. Jim Jones, Reverend Moon, Hitler. Sure, these people are only talking about vintage cars or trendy restaurants, but what's the end game? Or worse, what if there isn't one? What if one's influence continues to grow uncontrollably? What if the followers aren't content to merely listen to them talk? What if they want to go to their house, meet them in person, maybe touch them? Kind of scary. Okay, maybe that's all a little extreme. I'm not saying every person out there is intentionally leading their flock to the slaughterhouse. I'm just saying it's a system with inherent flaws that involves large numbers of people focusing on an individual person for guidance and decision making. And maybe I'm just a grumpy old man used to making money the old-fashioned way by working for a living. And maybe I'm a little pissed off that people have found a way to make good money without working their asses off like I did. Or maybe this whole influencer business, and it's definitely a business, just coincides with the two main problems I have with social media in general. One, it gave every idiot a voice. And two, the one who controls the most idiots wins.
Wow. How true that is. Absolutely. Before Steve and I came online today to record this, um, I was sharing with him that, sometimes you have to make choices in life that make you feel good, um, or at least don't hurt you. And influencers tend to, not all, but a lot of them out there, they tend to sort of hurt us because we stop listening to our own thoughts. You know, um, I'm going to follow this influencer on fashion, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy clothes and I'm going to wear them and I'm going to do all these things because look what she's saying. She knows what she's saying.
Right.
Um, and then you look in the mirror one day and you go, who is that person? You know, why would I be wearing this outfit? Why would I be wearing this color? Um, so, as much as I like social media just for the connections with family and friends, um, I agree with you that the louder your voice, the more you're going to influence. Um, and history has shown us there are too many bad influencers out there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of scary, and most of social media is good. It's fine. It's provides a purpose. It's just I've noticed that influencers, you never really know if that's even really what they look like. I mean, they
right.
could use filters, they could, Photoshop. You don't really know who they are. You're just kind of, it's almost like you're watching a TV show,
Yep. Yep.
and this person is acting, and you're kind of locked into a series that's got 35 episodes, 35 seasons, 10 episodes a season, and you can't stop watching it. And it's entertaining, but in a different way. It's like you have to watch this. Now what do they think? God, I wonder what I should do today. Let me see what they think. I wonder what they're doing, and maybe that's better than what I'm doing. And you're right. You kind of lose your individuality. All of a sudden you stop trusting yourself, and you're like, well, they're successful, so they must know how to be successful. I'm not successful, so I must be doing it wrong. They must be doing it right. There's just a lot to read into that, and I think too many people really are relying on that, kind of for their daily, you know, just to get through the day, and
Absolutely.
it's scary. It's scary. And
And
I'm sure it works for a lot of people. It works, and that's kind of just the little edge they need to get through the day, and that helps them positively. But I mean, to have 5 million followers, and there's just so many idiots out there. There's just so many people just trolling, and just waiting for, and just spending their day bad mouthing things and bad mouthing people, and there's, I don't know if there's more of them than not, or what the percentage is, but there's enough of them out there, and you see it all the time. I don't have a Twitter account or an Instagram account, but I listen to a lot of talk radio, and a lot of these people, in the media have to have one.
sure.
And they talk about it all the time. I mean, yeah, sometimes I don't even look at it, because I know after what I just said, I'm going to have 100 people, sending me hate mail. It just, and it's one thing to disagree with you, but I mean, these people get out of hand.
Well, and I start to think about. I know you and I both grew up in an era where computers and social media was going and sitting on your next door neighbor's porch. Okay.
Right,
And
right.
you talked about the day, and typically there was a newspaper around. Um, and so maybe you looked in the newspaper and you read the headlines or a story. Um, and we always felt that the news that we were reading back then was absolutely real, and uh, nobody would print anything that wasn't. Although looking back now, I sort of wonder
Right.
about that too. But we did think for ourselves because we read this thing in black and white, and then we'd start asking each other questions. Um, and, you know, as much as technology has helped us, I believe it really has hurt us to the point that um, we really feel like we have to be as successful as the next guy. And yet, I think if we were to identify what success is to us, most of us would not have a real good explanation. I mean,
Yeah.
growing up,
Yeah.
when I, you know, just got married the first time, to me, success was I was going to help him get through dental school, and then we were going to have a family, and we were going to have a house, and all these things. And that to me was success, but yet my life didn't turn out that way. And I don't think I'm not, I think I am successful, but in certain little areas. And to somebody else, they could look at it and go, no, you're not. You live in a, a 3-bedroom condo. If you were successful, you'd be living in Beverly Hills in a mansion.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It's different when it's just written down on paper and you're reading it versus when you're looking at somebody saying the exact same thing. You're focused on what they look like, what they sound like, their tan, maybe the background is, Tahiti or something, and you kind of fall into, you kind of lose what they say a little bit, I remember the first time I experienced people like this was back when Paris Hilton came on the scene and Kim Kardashian first came on the scene. I'm like, okay, these people are popular, they're in the news all the time, but so what do they do? What is their, do they have a job? Do they, and are they actors, celebrities somehow? And they weren't. They were, their parents kind of were kind of important, Paris Hilton's dad, but every time their name popped up, I kind of look, I check it out and I see, well, did they do something? Did they, get a job? And it's like, well, no, this person is dating that person and that person is sleeping with that person. And that was their claim to fame.
right.
They were famous for absolutely nothing. And I thought, wow, this is really weird.
Well, having the right name in the right place, for some of us, that just means, that means a lot. When I guess this goes back to the 80s, I went out to California, and I have 2 brothers, and my the middle brother worked in the industry, and he took my husband and I out to lunch. And the first thing he said to us was, "You will probably see a lot of celebrities. Please do not get excited. They're there for whatever reason, and we're going for lunch." So we went in, and I'm spotting certain people, and it's like, trying to keep my head down. And at the end of lunch, my brother says to my husband, "Didn't you notice that woman who was sitting behind you?" And he goes, "Yes, you told me not to respond."
Wow.
He goes, "Well, that was Carol Alt, and she's a big time model. She was beautiful." He said, "If you had turned around, you might have gotten her autograph."
Wow.
Not to react. He said,
Man, oh man.
"I just wanted to see what
That's
somebody
funny.
would say." And we walked out of the restaurant, and as I'm walking out, and somebody else came in that who I recognized from TV or something.
I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt you. I lost you. I lost the
Lost?
sound again.
Am I there?
I can't hear you.
Wow. Let's try something else again. Okay, hold on. How's that now?
Now I can hear you.
My
That's weird.
soundboard is having problems.
That's weird.
But what I was saying was that as I walked out, I just realized they're people just like me. And maybe they thought I was famous. Who knows? So
Yeah, could be. I've never seen that face before. Yeah, kind of new talent on the scene. Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow.
So you have another theory for us today. What's that one?
I do. Kind of similar, kind of not. It's just more of what's going on in society today. I wrote this maybe I think it was about 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago. So it's not quite exactly current, but within the last year, has to do with the influence that not a specific influencer, but the influence that certain groups have on making major change. This one is called. This is number 41, called "The End of the World as We Know It." Here are just a few examples ripped from the headlines of a sad reminder of the current misguided state of affairs in this glorious country of ours. 1, the plaything formerly known as Mr. Potato Head. Gender neutrality has stripped and neutered this 70-year-old iconic plastic toy. Neither Mr. nor Mrs. It will be henceforth known as simply Potato Head. Number 2, book burning. Apparently, Babar, Curious George, and a half a dozen books by Dr. Seuss are poisoning the fragile minds of our preschoolers nationwide. Imagine a drawing of an Asian person eating Asian food with Asian utensils. What was the man thinking? And number 3, bad Muppets. A disclaimer before the start of the Muppet Show now states that some Muppets are depicted as exaggerated characters of people or races. I thought that was the whole idea. I guess not. Some of the guilty parties include Miss Piggy, fat shaming, the Swedish chef, a Scandinavian slur, and the heckling old men, ageism. Watch out, Mowgli, Aladdin, Dumbo, they're coming for you next. And finally, a medical doctor was recently asked when this whole pandemic would finally end. The doctor replied, "How should I know? I'm not a politician." So just, things that drive me crazy,
Well, there were certain phrases that we grew up using that now are no longer acceptable. And sometimes you don't even know it's not acceptable until it comes out of your mouth and somebody says, "Oh, what are you talking about?"
Right.
And I find it frustrating that we have to be that nitpicky about things. Language evolves, culture evolves, but some of us live in little communities where we haven't seen all those changes yet. And yet we become bad people when we do things based on our culture and our upbringing. I'll give our listeners a real good example. My husband grew up with, my father-in-law was in sales his whole life. And he was just this joyful man, and he'd walk into a room and he'd tell women they were beautiful. And he schmoozed in such a way that is not acceptable today. And yet he meant no harm. So my husband was at an event, and there was a young girl, and I was on the other side of the room. And he said to her, "Has anyone ever told you how attractive you are?" He was just paying a compliment.
Right.
And she looked at him and she said, "Excuse me, you should not be talking to me that way." And from a distance, I saw that he was almost crumbling to the floor.
Wow.
And I walked over and I said, "Is everything okay?" And he goes, "Why can't you tell a young woman that she's beautiful?" And I said, "Because somebody else who's listening is going to think you're coming on to her." He said, "But my father did it his whole life."
Right.
And I said, "I know." And
Right.
as women, I don't think we thought that was so terrible. But somebody, one of those influencers, has convinced
right.
us you can't
Right.
talk to people like that anymore.
Right. Yeah. And it every time that happens, it gives groups more power. I understand racism, and I understand that, you can't call people racial slurs, and it all evolved from really not liking somebody because of their race.
Sure.
And I understand the basis of all of it, but it's just blown into just such odd proportions. I mean, I was confused when I was a kid when like the Orient was always the Far East, right? I mean, that's how we learned it in history and geography class and history class. Okay, the Orient, that was where, that was the Far East. Well, when you called someone an Oriental, that made sense because they were from the Orient.
Right.
Okay. You can't say that anymore. You can't call somebody an Oriental because it's a slur somehow. And it's geography based. It isn't, I don't like you, so I'm going to call you an Oriental. It's
right.
and yeah, it's more maybe geographically inclusive, geographically inclusive, to say Asian because that's Asia, but it just gets kind of worse from there. I was curious about the Guardians when you guys changed your name, when the Indians changed to the Guardians. I remember the initial issue was Chief Wahoo, right? And
right.
the Indian community didn't like that what he depicted or the silliness of him, right? He was just silly, right? And I thought, okay, that fine, if that offends you, I don't agree, but okay, fine. And I thought, well, maybe they'll just change the logo, but I never understood why they had to lose Indians, because that isn't anything bad.
So it's interesting because here in Cleveland, yes, they felt they had to change their name to be how can I put it, so that social media really didn't keep battering them. I really, that's it. But there is a team, a farm team on the West Coast that they're called the Indians. And the reason why their stadium is actually built on Indian property, and the Indian community has supported them.
Mm-hmm.
So in that respect, they don't need to change their name because it looks they're honoring that tribal community.
Right.
And I understand where people have come from with Chief Wahoo, because if you look at him in the beginning stages up until he's been evolved many, many times, the beginning one basically showed a cartoon character with a red face, but that was our understanding back then.
Right.
That's
right.
If you go back and you watch TV Westerns from the 40s and 50s, that's exactly what you see.
Right.
And so I think sometimes, we get a little bit too sensitive. And I think maybe an apology could have kept either Chief Wahoo or the name Indians here, but it wasn't my choice. It wasn't your choice. They now are my guardians.
Right.
And right now they're doing semi-decently, so I can be excited about them.
Absolutely.
But again, I think that's where the influencers come in. They convince you that, hey, there's a whole group of people who don't like something, so we're going to change it.
Right.
And
right. And if it's going to somehow, I'm sure they saw what happened in Washington, with the Redskins. It was huge, and it lasted forever. And I guess they probably just didn't want to be them. Right. So they just caved immediately. Whatever you want, I'll give you whatever. I'll change whatever, and that was probably the smarter thing to do from a business standpoint and from a social media standpoint, because, they didn't, Washington caught a lot of hell for that, and their resistance to change. And then they changed it, but they didn't change it to anything. It was just, the Washington football team, for 2 years, they couldn't call it anything. And I guess they learned from that lesson that you're not going to win. You try to argue, you try to fight, you're not going to win in this situation, but it's just so random. They could do that with, 80% of the sports teams out there in every sport. They could do it, like you said, they're minor league teams, hundreds and hundreds of them in every sport. It's just, are they really going to hit every single one? Are you really going to, that's your goal, to change every sports name or school name? The Red Devils, the Duke Blue Devils, well, hell, I'm Catholic. The word devil freaks me out. There's no way that your mascot can be a devil. I'm sorry. I'm going to get all the 10 million Catholics together. We're going to fight this. There's no end to it. And if you kind of worry about everybody that's offended, there's nothing left. There's nothing left. The Muppets. I didn't understand this whole movement to make a disclaimer, because that's what the show was. It was making fun of people in their own way, and making people actually more kind of accessible, you know. I mean,
Oh,
okay, now you can like this person now. You know, maybe you didn't like that ethnicity or whatever, but I mean, look at this guy, you know, he's a great character representing that, you know, race or religion or whatever. And you could latch on to that. You could say, man, this guy's great, you know.
well,
Um,
I think it's interesting because my oldest son, um, who's now in his 40s, watched Sesame Street all the time. And his two favorite characters were Bert and Ernie. And to me, Bert and Ernie were either brothers or best friends. Okay. Never
right,
thought of them as anything else. Neither did my son. Um, he just, just liked those characters. And I remember probably when my youngest started watching Sesame Street, somebody said to me that, Bert and Ernie are gay. And I said, oh, that's great. And they looked at me and they go, what do you mean it's great? I said, well, I have relatives who are gay and I have neighbors and friends. And I said, there's reality now on Sesame Street.
right, right,
They don't look like you and me. That's
right,
the best part of understanding it, is that they are who they are. And if you've liked them in the past, why don't you like them now?
right, right,
And this parent looked at me and said, are you serious? And I said, you know, I think I understand my older son's identity. He's heterosexual, at least he appears to be. And if he's not, that's okay too. He's my son and I love him. I said, and my youngest appears to be as well. I said, but you know what? My favorite cousin was homosexual. And I'll never forget when I was 9 years old at their house, I was sitting next to him watching TV and I turned to him and I said, Cousin Stuart, I'm going to marry you someday. And he looked at me and he said, no, you're not. And it's not because we're cousins. And I just looked at him and I thought, I don't understand that. And
right,
about 10 years later, all of a sudden that conversation came back to me. And it was like, that's what he was trying to tell me. Oh, okay, that's fine. He was still my favorite cousin.
right,
Loved him to
right,
death. So we have to normalize all this and stop putting my my needs and turn them into yours. You
right,
know,
right, right. And what you said, you know, when one of the problems is you have two groups opposing each other, okay, and you're, if you let the groups decide what's what, then I mean, which is what's happening now, the
right.
loudest group, the strongest group. um you have people that are pro gay, right? The LGBT, I don't remember the acronym, um which is fine, but then you have people that are anti-gay, just as many, you know, and they want to remove the gays, and you know, gay people want to include them. So which group wins? You know, I mean, obviously, you know, the people that don't want the gays are prejudiced, and you know, they're based on that, but it's the same type of thing. Okay, I have enough people gathered together, I want to make a change because I don't like that, and it completely opposes another group that's doing the same thing. And who wins, you know? And what if it's closer than that? What if it's a lot, they're way more similar? Who wins and why, you know?
And does somebody have to win? And I think that's where we are
Yeah,
in our global society today. I think if competition is good, but competition, when it tears us apart, when it turns us into people that we really are not, then I think, it there's no place for it in our society.
right,
One of the main reasons that we do this podcast and the others here at New Cleveland Radio is because we have a chance to voice thoughts. Our listeners can go along with them if that's what they choose, but they can have something totally on the other side of the spectrum, and that's absolutely fine. I want to learn what other people like and dislike, and not because I need them to influence me and change me, but if I understand, then I become a better person. And isn't that what we all want to be? Isn't that what success is?
I thought so. I thought so. I don't know. Some people, they're not satisfied unless, the status quo changes, whether it's for the better or for the worse. This has been around too long. This needs to change. Just for the change, just for the sake of change, like in baseball that I talk about all the time.
Right.
It isn't so much this needs to change, it just should, because it's boring, or somebody feels it's time to change. Okay, it's been 100 years, we need to change something. But I think it's the difference between what we do and maybe influencers or something else, is that we're not telling people to do something. We're not saying, okay, this is what we think, you need to think that too. Think what I think. Okay, I'm telling you that I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, everybody else is wrong. That's not what we're saying. We're voicing our opinion. You can disagree as much as you want, and you can follow us, you can not. We're not trying to change somebody's mind.
Right.
We make a lot of noise, we complain a little bit, we tell stories. And this is how I feel, this is how you feel. But I think that's the difference, between, an influencer, and that's their job, is to change somebody, or to get them to follow them. And this is, do what I do because I'm right. I'm doing it right. You probably not. But if you follow me, yeah, it just goes crazy. But again, it just affirms what we do to me. I mean, I like what we
Absolutely.
do. I like, the messages we put across, the banter that we have.
I love it. Well, we will do this again next month. I'm looking forward to it. And if anybody is out there listening and you have some ideas for thoughts, theories, and queries, please contact us at newclevelandradio@gmail.com. And what's the weather like out in California right now, Stu?
Hot. It's
Well,
been, I mean, where I'm a little bit inland, I'm not on the coast.
Okay.
It's always 10 degrees hotter where I am than the coast. But I mean, we've been in the 90s and hundreds for the last 2 weeks. We got a little bit of cloud cover the last couple of days, but it's been super hot. What about out there?
It's been very hot and humid in the Cleveland area. I'm not complaining because I am not a winter person. So I
Yeah.
will take the hot and humidity. And in about an hour or so, my hair will be sticking out to here because of the humidity. But
That's funny.
hey, that's just the way it is.
That's funny. That's what you do.
Absolutely. Well, have a good day and we will
Thank you.
talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.
Sounds good. Bye.